At first glance, war always looks like something happening far away. Numbers on a screen, maps with arrows, experts debating outcomes. But when the conflict involves countries like Israel, Iran, and the United States, it stops being distant. It becomes something far more dangerous, something that can reshape the entire world overnight. And in the last 24 hours, this war has taken a turn that even seasoned analysts didn't expect. Two major developments have pushed it into territory that was once considered unthinkable. The first is the growing shadow of the nuclear angle. The second is a desperate and aggressive ultimatum issued by Donald Trump. Together they signal that this conflict is no longer just regional, it is on the edge of becoming global. Until now, most discussions around this war avoided the word nuclear, not because it wasn't relevant, but because it represents the most extreme scenario, something nations try to avoid at all costs. But now, that word is no longer being avoided. It's slowly entering the conversation, and that alone should worry everyone. Reports began circulating that Iran had attacked a nuclear facility in Israel. But when you look closer, that's not exactly what happened. The actual strike was near the city of Dimona, not directly on the nuclear facility itself. That facility, known as the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center, remains intact. However, the message behind the strike is far more important than the physical damage. This was not just an attack, it was a signal, a calculated move, a warning. Iran was essentially saying, if our nuclear sites are targeted, yours are not untouchable either. And that changes everything. Because this particular facility is not just any installation. It's historically tied to Israel's nuclear capability, the place where its earliest nuclear weapons were developed decades ago. So even if the strike didn't hit the core facility, targeting the surrounding area sends a psychological shockwave. Imagine if a similar strike happened near India's Bhabha Atomic Research Center. The reaction wouldn't just be military, it would be emotional, strategic, and deeply political. But this also raises another critical question. What happened to Israel's much-celebrated air defense systems? Systems like Iron Dome, Patriot, and THAAD were considered nearly impenetrable. Yet now, missiles are getting through, not just once, but repeatedly. Cities like Tel Aviv are witnessing heavy bombardment. This suggests something significant. Iran has either adapted its missile strategy or Israel's defense systems are being overwhelmed. Either way, the balance is shifting. For the first time in years, Iran appears to have gained a form of aerial leverage, at least psychologically. At the same time, the United States has continued its strikes on Iran's nuclear infrastructure, particularly the Natanz nuclear facility. This site has been targeted multiple times, with the goal of crippling Iran's uranium enrichment capabilities. The logic is simple: prevent Iran from ever reaching nuclear weapon capability. But the problem is that such actions invite retaliation. And Iran has made its doctrine very clear: tit for tat. You hit our strategic assets, we respond in kind. That's exactly what we are seeing unfold. Now comes the most dangerous part of this entire equation: the possibility of escalation beyond conventional warfare. There is a concept often discussed in strategic circles called the Samson option. It refers to a scenario where Israel, if pushed to the brink of existential threat, could resort to nuclear retaliation. It's a last resort doctrine, one that no one wants to see activated. But the mere fact that analysts are now discussing it openly tells you how serious the situation has become. Because if even a tactical nuclear weapon is used, the consequences won't be limited to one region. It would trigger global outrage, diplomatic isolation, and possibly even a chain reaction of conflicts. And just as this tension builds, Donald Trump enters the picture with a dramatic escalation. After declaring victory-like statements, he suddenly issues a 48-hour ultimatum to Iran. The demand: open the Strait of Hormuz unconditionally, or face the destruction of Iran's entire power grid. This is not a small threat. The Strait of Hormuz is one of the most critical choke points in the global energy system. Nearly 20% of the world's oil passes through it. Any disruption here affects not just one country, but the global economy. But Iran's response was immediate and equally aggressive. Within hours, they warned that any attack on their civilian infrastructure, like power plants, would be met with triple retaliation, not just against the United States or Israel, but against their allies across the Gulf. They even hinted at targeting energy infrastructure, desalination plants, and critical digital infrastructure. In a region where up to 90% of drinking water depends on desalination, this is not just warfare, it's the potential collapse of basic human survival systems. What makes this situation even more unpredictable is the apparent contradiction in American actions. On one hand, there are statements about de-escalation. On the other, there are fresh strikes and aggressive ultimatums. This inconsistency creates confusion not just among allies, but also among adversaries. And in war, confusion is dangerous. It leads to miscalculations. It leads to overreactions. Meanwhile, Iran seems to be shifting its strategy. For weeks, it appeared defensive. But now, there are signs of increased aggression. Analysts believe that Iran may have held back its more advanced missile systems and is now beginning to deploy them strategically. This could explain the increasing success rate of its strikes. It also suggests that the conflict may enter an even more intense phase in the coming days. Another troubling aspect is misinformation and confusion on the battlefield. Incidents like the explosion in Bahrain, initially blamed on Iranian drones, are now being attributed to friendly fire, possibly malfunctioning defense systems. Similar confusion surrounds other reported attacks. In a war like this, where information is tightly controlled and narratives are shaped in real time, the truth becomes one of the first casualties. And then there's the human cost. Cities reduced to rubble, civilians caught in the crossfire. Ironically, the same accusations once directed at Israel regarding civilian casualties and controversial weapon usage are now being echoed in reverse. This cycle of accusation and retaliation highlights the deep hypocrisy embedded in modern warfare. Each side claims justification. Each side claims victimhood. Diplomatically, the situation is just as complex. Organizations like the G7 are calling for restraint, but often appear to place the burden unevenly. Statements urging Iran to stop, without equally addressing actions by the United States or Israel, further deepen the divide. It creates a perception of bias, which only fuels further escalation. At its core, this war is no longer just about territory or strategy. It's about dominance, deterrence, and survival. Iran is demanding guarantees, no future attacks, withdrawal of U.S. presence from the region, and even reparations. On the other hand, the United States cannot easily withdraw without losing its strategic foothold in the Middle East. The stakes are too high on both sides. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous. There is no easy exit, no simple compromise. Every move now carries the risk of triggering something far bigger. A single miscalculation could push this conflict beyond control. As the 48-hour deadline ticks down, the world watches anxiously. Will there be escalation? Will there be restraint? Or will this conflict cross a line that can never be uncrossed? Because right now, this is no longer just a war between nations. It's a test of how close the world is willing to come to the edge, and whether it knows how to step back before it's too late.